Welcome back to another week of Political Breakfast. We are so glad that you are here and listening on WABE. I'm Lisa Rayam, and with me are our strategists, Brian Robinson and Tharon Johnson. Hello, hello, hello.
Hey there.
Good morning.
Mondays, they roll around pretty quickly, don't they?
They sure do. You know, the weekends go fast when you got college football keeping you occupied, and we had a barn burner on the plains in Alabama
this weekend. It was exciting
this weekend.
Saturday, wasn't it? Oh, yeah.
Man, my little brother, younger brother, I say little, he's 47 years old. He and his son were there, and towards the end of the first half, I was like, y'all might want to leave early. I think these people are going to riot. It might not be safe for somebody wearing red getting out of there.
Yeah, Auburn was pretty impressive, right? Putting numbers up on the board.
In the first half, certainly,
yeah.
But they're going to complain forever, saying that the end of the first half, they scored a touchdown, it was taken away from them, yada, yada, yada.
The game they almost won, right?
Yeah. It was stolen from them. That's what they're going to say.
How about you, Tharon? You must have missed football completely, because normally you're right there.
Well, I mean, B-Rob,
there he is.
In the moment, I definitely was at an event for a good friend of mine who's celebrating his 50th birthday. So I was around a bunch of Auburn fans, and I saw the punch out. And I thought it was a touchdown. I did
too. I did too.
There we go. All right. But then, after a long conversation, film review, it came out. So to me, that was a key turning point in the game. And yeah, the Auburn fans have a point. The second thing we got to talk about, Lisa, is that, this Kirby Smart guy, boy, you're talking about persuasive. It did kind of look like he was calling a timeout, but after further review, he does clap a lot. He does speed his team up to tell them to get the playoff, and then I guess a free safety from Auburn did a little clapping thing. That was. I feel some of my Auburn fans. I'm glad we won the game. I won some of my bets, but they do have some legitimacy in their complaints.
I don't disagree.
Tonight, prime time for the Falcons, but maybe not because they're playing Buffalo, right?
It's going to be a tough one.
I think the Falcons are going to do well. They've had an off week to prepare. Buffalo as well, I think, had an off week. So I definitely think it's going to be a good game. I know fans are going to be turned up. And there's a lot of, Bills Nations folks. Lisa, I ran into you over the weekend in Midtown at a great event. But after I left there, I actually went to visit one of my friends to drop off something. And I saw a lot of Bills Nation folks in town. So there's some Bills fans here. But I think Atlanta folks are going to show up big for us.
This dropped Vernon Jones running for Secretary of State in 2026 here in Georgia. Brian, any reaction to that?
I think it's great news for Gabe Sterling as much as anything. He becomes the fourth person to be in the Republican primary for this Secretary of State's job. And this Gabe, it's Representative Tim Fleming from Covington. It is Kelvin King, who ran for Senate in 2022 and is the husband of State Election Board member Janelle King, and now Vernon. So it's going to get to be a crowded field. And Gabe really has his own lane. So if your angle against Gabe is, hey, we're the Trump guys and Gabe really isn't a Trump guy, that side of the primary is getting really full. There's going to be a lot of choices for MAGA people. And I think the bigger the field, the more likely it is that Gabe finishes with a bigger plurality, which will give him a lot of momentum and a lot of strength going into a runoff. I think a runoff is pretty much almost guaranteed here if the field stays this big and people are able to spend money on it to get attention. Yeah, I'm not saying that it's out of the question that Gabe could win without a runoff because he's got this extraordinarily high name ID, really an unprecedented amount of name ID for somebody who is a staffer, not even an elected official. Normally the Secretary of State in a state doesn't have name ID. Of course, Raffensperger has name ID that rivals that of Governor Kemp. And then Gabe Sterling, because of circumstance, has really high name ID. Got his own lane, and the more the merrier for Gabe Sterling. I do not think that Vernon Jones is going to be able to build a coalition that will get him into a runoff, much less win a runoff. He ran for Congress in 2022 and lost. He had the Trump endorsement in that race, which in many parts of rural Georgia would be determinative. That would make sure that you won. He still lost that race to now Congressman and Senate candidate Mike Collins. So if you're not going to be able to win with the Trump endorsement in a rural district, how are you going to win statewide? Or you've got to go and get the votes of these highly educated, wealthier Metro Atlanta voters who are not going to be open to what he has to sell. Vernon Jones does have a brand, and for many Republicans, it's not a great brand. He, of course, has been around for a very long time. If you live in DeKalb or in the city of Atlanta, you've known about him for a long time. And a lot of those stories aren't great, right?
Yeah.
Going back to his time as CEO of DeKalb. So I see this as a very difficult pathway. I don't know who his donors would be, who that donor base for him would be. I don't think they're out there. I think this is just a way for him to continue to get attention. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of attention played in this race at all. I mean, unless Gabe Sterling himself drives it because there's interest around him. I don't think there's going to be interest around Vernon Jones. And look, we got much bigger fish to fry in Georgia with the governor's race and the U.S. Senate race.
And the Secretary of State. As you know, Tharon, Jones switched from the Democratic Party, strong supporter of Donald Trump. He says he's going to fight for secure elections, defend our values, and make Georgia the model for America First election integrity. What is your response to that?
Well, I'm conflicted, right? Because there's a part of me who don't want to necessarily defend a Republican in a primary, right? But then there's also the fact that, B-Rob sound much like I sound about Jeff Duncan, and him wanting to run as a Democrat. The difference is that I do have to admit that Vernon Jones does have a little bit more of a controversial past with some of the things that he did as CEO. But if I'm going to be objective, Lisa, I respectfully disagree with B-Rob on a couple things. Number one, Vernon Jones has a tremendous amount of social media presence. He is an influencer. He sends things out. Not only do we talk about it, Lisa, the press here talks about it. Number two, Vernon Jones, I think, legitimately is going to compete for the Trump endorsement. Now, we know Gabe Sterling is definitely not going to get the endorsement.
Yeah, we can rule that
Trump.
out. That's right. Yeah.
But he definitely, I think, is on a level with the other folks in Georgia that has Trump's ear. The Bruce Lavelles of the world, and other African Americans, and including the Calvin King and Janelle King. So if Vernon Jones is able to secure the Donald Trump nomination, and there's going to be this big, massive sort of surge of MAGA voters, I think he may have a path to force it to a runoff because, as B-Rob just mentioned, you just really want to get this into a runoff. The third thing I would say is this. Yes, fundamentally, I disagree with Vernon Jones on a lot of things. I would have loved for him to remain in the Democratic Party, but since he's left, he's been very critical of us as Democrats. He's been very critical of the party, and he's raised actually some good questions. Lisa, you may remember when Jeff Duncan decided to run for office, Vernon Jones said publicly what some folks were saying privately, and that is that, the sort of the opportunistic point of view from Jeff Duncan getting in the race, and it also implies that all the black candidates that we have in the race now are quote unquote not good enough. Now that's Vernon Jones' words, not my words. So if Vernon is able to raise some money, and he's able to really stay disciplined, because that's the other thing, right? And believe it or not, Lisa, I still go to the barbershop. I don't go to get my hair all moisturized and my waves, that sort
of texture has been gone. Huh?
I go there because that's my black man country club. I want to know what the streets are saying and what's going on. And when Vernon Jones is in that barbershop, Lisa, and I come in after him, I spend 60% of the time undoing the myths and the lies that he's told about the Democrats in the barbershop. But he is so persuasive, and he leaves some of those folks beginning some of this. So I think it's going to be interesting. Does he get the Trump endorsement? And more importantly, can he stay disciplined on message? And what's the difference between him and the other sort of Trump backers in the race? Because as B-Rob said, Gabe does have a lane. And Gabe does have name recognition, but not name recognition as a candidate before. Yes, he's been in the paper. If you Google him, his name comes up, but he's never been on the ballot. He's dressing better. He's much more sociable now. I think he's getting some good coaching, Lisa, from some of these very high paid consultants out here in Georgia. And Gabe has got some swag. He does. He's got some swag, and he's been there. He knows the job. So don't count Vernon out just yet, but it is a tough road. Yeah, I think it's a tough road for him.
And Vernon is a smart politician. Why though would he jump into the race right now?
I think he has to add some indication that Trump may endorse him. And then the second thing I'll say real quick, B. Rob, I think it's a little unfair to compare him to Mike Collins in that race. I mean, come on, you and I both know if nobody black is going to win that district. I mean, you can be black Republican, black Messiah, black independent. It don't matter. Like, that district is overwhelmingly conservative, overwhelmingly white. And unlike the Republican Party, we let people run over here in the Democratic Party. Now, we've raised questions, but there was no way he ever had a shot of even scratching the surface of having a chance to win in that district.
I mean, it did play out the way you're saying. I did think he had a shot because up until 2022, a Trump endorsement meant you were going to win in Georgia. That changed in 2022, so we didn't really know. But when that happened, I thought, well, that's probably that. And of course, Mike Collins ran a very MAGA campaign, and had a little bit more. He worked really hard. The guy is just an Energizer bunny. But I do think that Tharon may have given us some news here if he's hearing that there may be a Trump endorsement involved for Vernon Jones. I have not heard that. I do know that certainly Tim Fleming and Kelvin King would both be folks who would hope to get it as well. But hey, if Tharon knows something I don't know, that would be very interesting. I think that might put him into a runoff.
I want to be clear. I'm not saying that he's going to get the Trump endorsement. No, I want to be clear. Let me clear that up. I think that he's in the position to compete for it. Yeah, I think the world of Tim Fleming. I think Tim Fleming is a good man. Kelvin King, that's a conversation for another day. But him and his wife have been Trump supporters. But come on, B-Rob, we can't forget it. This man, Vernon Jones, he crowd surfed for this guy. He was crowd surfing at a rally. Yeah. I mean, and I think Trump likes that sort of theater. So not that he's guaranteed an endorsement. I do think he's in a position to compete for it, along with the two others you mentioned.
Yeah, and we'll see if Trump even decides to go down ballot here. We don't know. I talked to a White House official at the end of last week who he and I were talking about some of the people running statewide, and he said, look, Brian, Trump's going to take a look at it. He's very interested in Georgia, but it's going to be sometime in 2026 before he really looks at anything down ballot. Obviously, he has already weighed in for Burt Jones, but he hasn't really weighed in even at the governor's level across the country except for here. So it's sort of an anomaly that he's endorsed already in Georgia. So we don't know when or even if he'll weigh in and it gets down ballot like that. What I would think Trump would do, because Trump doesn't want to pick people who lose. He had a bad year in 2022, picked a lot of people who lost. I think he's very sensitive to that. He wants to make sure that the Trump endorsement looks like the golden ticket, that if you get that, you're going to win. So I think he's going to take a wait and see attitude. I wouldn't be shocked if he waits to see who gets into the runoff with Gabe Sterling to then make that determination. So it's then on you to get into the runoff. And one thing I think is going to be interesting to watch is will Gabe Sterling...
Can I ask you a question, though, seriously?
Yeah.
What makes you think, and I'm not questioning you're pretty good over the years of predicting winners in Republican primaries. I think the only one that I predicted that was shocked a lot of people is that I knew that David Perdue was going to win his primary for U.S. Senate. Mm-hmm. And the chief and I put it on social media, Lisa, so it's okay, it's discoverable. But we made a bet and I won it. But what makes you think that Gabe is sort of already in the runoff in this election? What data do we have to show his name ID is where you are sort of conveying that it is?
Yeah, great questions. And full disclosure, I do not have recent data on what his name ID is. We knew, I saw stuff going back, closer to 2020, 2021, where it was extraordinarily high. Now, we can anticipate that it has gone down some. Once you are no longer in people's faces every day, in a state as dynamic and with as much population churn as we have, that name ID goes down pretty fast. But Gabe has managed to stay in the media way more than even many elected officials over the last couple of years. He has quit his job now, but if he hadn't, we would be seeing him on the news right now talking about early voting and all that. He was able to channel that very well into keeping his name out there. So I don't have data to back up. I have my gut. I think that his name ID and the fact that there is a certain level of Georgia Republicans who appreciate him and Brad Raffensperger, that's going to be enough to give him a floor that gets him into a runoff. Can I prove it with data? Which I'm with you. When somebody says this kind of stuff, I'm like, prove it to me. Show me the science behind your argument. And I do not have science. I have gut. And the question is, once he gets into a runoff, is that floor high enough that he's got a catapult point to get over 50%? That's going to be the trick. One thing I'm going to look at here is, will he be able to parlay his high name ID and some level of fame and, goodwill with a lot of voters to go get a lot of billionaires or people who are worth, hundreds of millions of dollars to fund an outside group that will help him? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that Gabe knows the answer to that. But he's one of those unique cases where I could see people coming in from the outside to say, this guy stood up for democracy. He was courageous. He was brave, and we're going to support him.
Yeah, Lisa, I don't, and again, we're going to trust Brian Robinson's gut here because that's golden, baby. You can take it to the bank. But Lisa, I just think that if Burt Jones is going to be in a position to be the Republican nominee, based on what the science and some people's guts are telling us, that if there's a big, massive MAGA movement for him in the governor's race, and he prevails into a runoff, right? Because I agree with B. Rob. I think that goes to a runoff as well. Then do those voters then go in there and split their votes, maybe for Kelvin, Tim, or in this case now Vernon Jones. But if it's a huge surge and if Burt is able to win it without a runoff, I think that those folks are going to go up and down the ballot, and they're going to go with people that they think are pro-MAGA. And I think that, to me, goes back to B. Rob's original point. He's had some time to really, sleep over this and think about it. The more Trump sort of affiliates in this race helps Gabe, because he's definitely not going to be the Trump's choice. But can he raise enough money to remind people what he did, what he's going to do? Because we can't forget, elections are about the future. It's about what are you going to do if you're elected to this office. But if there's a huge MAGA movement, which I think Jones is going to do everything he can to spend that $10 million plus on, maybe it's not a Gabe Sterling runoff. Maybe it's two MAGA candidates with or without a Trump endorsement. So we just have to wait and see.
That's completely fair and very plausible. And I also think that one thing going in Gabe's favor that I do have some scientific polling data on is the argument against Gabe in a Republican primary has got to be that our elections are not secure and that he wasn't telling us the truth about the accuracy of our election, particularly in 2020. The thing is, in post-2021 elections, after SB 202 became the law of the land in our elections, Georgians overwhelmingly, and in a bipartisan fashion, say that they trust the outcome of Georgia's elections. They think our machines work. They think our processors work. They think that they trust the outcome as reported. So that's a huge benefit to Gabe Sterling. The argument that the elections are insecure, I don't think, according to the data we have, holds water with Georgia voters. That's a huge plus to him, somebody who is seen as a part of creating the current system that we use in voting.
All right, this gets trickier and trickier and murkier and murkier, and we have a long way to go, don't we? This is really just beginning. Later this week, though, I want to talk about an election that's coming up in November, the Public Service Commission election, and a lot of people don't pay attention to it, but should, at least according to our strategist here. So we're going to talk about that later in the week. So for now, we're going to wrap this one up, and thanks for joining us, and thanks for your perspective, both Brian and Tharon. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
Everyone, please go out and early vote today. It started in all your municipal elections across the state.
Yep. Runs through Halloween.